We are live for another episode of the TFD Performance Podcast, joined by a very special guest today. I've got Mr. James Pieratt. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. James, welcome.
It's great to be here, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Now, James, you have quite possibly one of the most wild stories I've ever heard. We jumped on a call last week just to catch up and have a bit of a chin wag. And as soon as you started talking, I thought to myself, I've got to get this guy on the podcast. This guy's life is crazy. James, can you just give us the elevator pitch, introduce yourself, and welcome the people listening to this to the world that is James Pieratt's life?
Oh, I can do that. So I'm a bear hunter out of Northern California, archery specifically. So I hunt bears in the mountains with bow and arrow. Primarily a solo hunter, so I'm usually by myself. Through that, I grew up hunting bear with my dad, and through that, I've gotten, I suppose you could say, some capacity for endurance that transferred pretty readily to the ultra marathon running world and the strength training world and the rucking world. I also am a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. I do some wrestling, a little bit of other martial arts, boxing and whatnot. And what else do I do? A little bit of everything, mostly a lot of weightlifting. I run Wild Hunt Conditioning. I'm the owner and primary coach for Wild Hunt, and we focus on building like multiple capacities simultaneously, particularly strength and endurance, with athleticism and some joint durability and protection and whatnot built in. And my own training reflects that myself, and so that's pretty much where I'm at.
There's a lot to unpack there, and there's probably 20 questions I've got straight off the top of my head. Before we get into that, let's get into this one, because where I'm from, bear hunting isn't a thing. I can't walk down the road and see Jill and Joan, and they're not bear hunters. That's not something you come across too often. Describe it for me and everyone listening to this. What is bear hunting? How did you get involved in that? And then what is it? What do you do when you go out bear hunting, aside from the obvious of hunting bears?
Yeah. My dad actually is a bear hunter, and we come from a long line of bear hunters. We've been in California for, I think, 2, 3 generations, but before that, we're from Kentucky, and we were houndsmen. So we raised hounds, bear hunting hounds, and ran them on bear. So basically, when you're hunting with hounds, you take them out, the hounds will pick up the scent of the bear through a variety of different ways, and you'll basically just have to keep up with the hounds at that brutal pace as they chase a bear. And you use either radio collars or just you listen, track by, in the old days, track by ear, the sound of their bays. And you can also tell by listening, like they bay differently when they're chasing bear as opposed to when the bear finally finds a tree or finds somewhere and they circle up on it. So you can kind of tell a lot just based on the sounds they're making. And generally the bear, while not particularly scared of the dogs, it's kind of like the comparison I use is like if you or me were out on the beach and like 6 or 7 angry hornets just got after you or me, like we wouldn't really be afraid, but we wouldn't want to just sit there and get stung over and over again, so we'd probably run away and find somewhere the hornets couldn't follow. And the bear do the same thing. So that's generally a tree. It can also be like a higher rock cropping. They climb a lot better than dogs do, obviously. And then that's when the hunters catch up and would traditionally shoot them either from the tree or when they came down. And so I grew up doing that. I started going out with my dad when I was 7, and it was pretty brutal. Like the elements it's a lot of cold, a lot of hunger, a lot of hardship, and then keeping up with the dogs as a grown man who's been doing it for years is rough. But when you're younger, it's hard. But I got used to it pretty quickly. It can be rough, but the enthusiasm at the end of the hunt tends to kind of wash all that away. It'd be pretty comparable to like an MMA camp. You go through, a long camp, all this discipline. You go through the weight cut. You go in there, you fight another man in a cage. But it's like if you win, and if that win means something, you're like, oh, dude, I don't even remember all that suffering that happened just over the last weeks and months. So and then as an adult, I now I hunt in Oregon and Idaho primarily. In Idaho, you can still run hounds. In Oregon, you cannot. And I traditionally just go out, like I said, solo with the bow. There's a variety of methods for tracking. In Idaho, you can bait them, which is not quite as easy as it sounds. They're pretty wily creatures, but you can use bait to get them into position or to find out where they're moving and track them off of that. In Oregon, you cannot. So generally, when I'm hunting Oregon, I'll go out and look for sign, the trail dropping, the tracks, droppings, whatnot. and try to figure out when and where they're moving where, which is hard with bears. They're very solitary creatures. They kind of just do what they want when they want. They're only really motivated by food and sex. So in that way, not too different from most humans. But and then you try to basically find out where they're going to be before they're there, set up a good shot. So it's generally like a trail they use a lot. Where I hunt in Oregon, there's a lot of old, like from the 40s and 50s, logging, disused and overgrown logging trails. And the bear, like us, like they got to cross the mountain range. They want to do it the easiest way possible. They don't, they're not going to be scaling straight rock faces. If there's a highway already built into the mountains, they'll use it. So you try to track them off of that, depending on spring or fall and some other food sources and behaviors. And then you try to get a clean arrow into them. Get one arrow in, right behind the armpit, go through both lungs and the heart, and it's a very quick and painless, relatively painless death. And generally, it's pretty merciful, especially compared to the other fates that would await them in nature.
Now, this all sounds like the physiological side of it and going out for these hunts, like we've spoken about before. You're out there for hours and hours and hours on it, if not days at sometimes. And it's not like you're just crawling along, right? Like it's quite a physiologically taxing thing. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, they're going, man, this sounds very similar to like Cameron Haynes and what those guys do, right? How do you think going bear hunting and growing up in that environment, how did that influence you getting into ultra marathon and going into that arena, which most people would consider is pretty nuts?
Actually, Cam's a mentor of mine. Where I hunt in Oregon. We're from similar areas, so he was the first guy. I think I didn't even have like a active Instagram account, like 90 followers, and he was the first guy to kind of back me and support me. So it's I'm always be grateful for that. But yeah, as far as how this hunts can last weeks. I was out in the spring 2 weeks, and a snowstorm hit and it left me buried for a while and stranded, actually legitimately stranded for 3 days. And so as far as how that translates to ultra marathons, though, they're a lot easier when you've done stuff like that, quite frankly. It's not that ultra marathons are easy, but it's like you only really have one thing to worry about, and that's fatigue. Like your food's being supplied, your safety is being supplied, the temperatures can, they can be all over the place, but you're generally prepared if you're going to be running in the desert at night and during the day and, wherever you're doing ultras. So just all the variables are controlled, and, there can be some with a lot of elevation, but you're usually running on trail. And it's like when I was 7 and I started following dogs at dog speed for, 18, 20 miles with no trails over broken ground, it's all relative. Just the compass is different. So when I first started running ultras, I was like, oh, this is, I don't want to say easy, but it was straightforward. All I have to do is not stop. And like that I can do. Like that's one thing that I am and have always been excellent at. So the dumb man sport, I guess you could say.
And then how did jujitsu come into all of this? You grew up hunting, you obviously got into the ultras. Where did the BJJ and combat sports come into it?
I did wrestling and traditional martial arts as a kid. And then one thing we kind of skipped over is I spent my teens and 20s in the organized crime world and incarcerated in many, I think 7 or 8 times in total. So I kind of came from a rougher world where fighting was more commonplace, not technical fighting per se. But as someone who could grapple and strike, it was definitely easier to navigate that world confidently. And when I got out and started putting the pieces of my life back together, it was just a pretty natural transition. It was something I'd always enjoyed when I was a kid. And a good friend of mine had kind of told me that, like, hey, we're never more honestly who we are than when we're children. And so when I was trying to figure out who I was and what I was going to do with my life, he was like, what were the things that excited you when you were a kid? And I was like, well, sports, hunting, and martial arts. You know what I mean? And so it was a pretty natural transition. From there, I tend to be very introverted by nature. So I do most of the things that I can do alone if it's feasible and, relatively safe. Then again, maybe bear hunting alone is not, but I've transitioned to running mostly solo ultra marathons. That's why I kind of do these challenges and tests. I don't actively go looking for records to break or anything like that. It just, like, this last one just happened and maybe happened a time or two before. And But it's really, I'd be doing this stuff whether I had a social media account or a business or not. And it's something I just feel drawn to. But I imagine I'll probably do some more. I've done some more organized ultras because I think competition, at least like once you start a new discipline, whether it's jujitsu or ultra running or whatever, like it can be very beneficial to compete, even if you're not trying to be a world champion. And I'm certainly not. I'm not by like elite ultra runner standards. I'm not fast. I can break. I can run 100 miles in, a touch less than 24 hours, which isn't like bad, but it's not good. Like the high level guys are doing 12 hours, and so it's like, I'm just very good at doing the same thing over and over again for a long time.
You're say you're saying that yet there's a Guinness World Record with your name on it, which I want to go into now. Tell us about this rucking Guinness World Record that you recently just slapped your name onto.
So the existing record was a man had run 69 miles with a 30-pound weight vest. I had not set out to break that record or even been aware of it until after the fact, but I had always wanted to just see how far I could run nonstop. And when I say nonstop, I just mean going out at 3 to 4 miles an hour, very light clip, and just how long can I hold this forever? I know guys have done stuff like that on treadmills for 24 hours, and you know what I mean? So I knew it was like, it wasn't like crazy outside the realm of possibility, but I wanted to do it self-supported. That was the kind of different thing. Obviously, I couldn't carry that much water. That'd be a crazy amount of weight for, that much fluid for that long of a run. So the water was set up along the way. We cached, hung from bottles on trees with ribbons, all sorts of things, so I could just grab them without actually stopping, physically moving. Um, and then everything was carried in my pack, which came in at a little over 35 pounds and actually got slightly heavier towards the end. It started out at 35 and a half pounds, and I think at the end it was like 37 something, because as I ate through more of my food, I had more room for water, which is heavier. Um, so I went out, and the everything felt pretty good on that first morning. Through the day, there was two toes that I had taped just a touch too tight that were like slightly annoying, but it would kind of like, I mean, as you know, when you do the longer endurance stuff, things just come and go. It's very weird, but you'll like one knee will just be agonizingly hurting, and then a minute later you won't be able to remember which knee it was, and it's like, it's just all these weird things. So it would come and go. There was also a little tiny piece of tape. Oh, the other thing I did differently for this specifically to repair was I taped my feet. I covered the entire bottoms of my feet, the entire pad, every inch of it in blister tape, and then I wrapped the feet with athletic tape because I knew there was a good chance of like fracturing my feet. And so there was a tiny little hole in one of the blister tapes on the tip of one of my toes that had worn away. So that was another thing, that just that one little spot, my mind zoomed in on and obsessed in, and it would just disappear. But overall, like no complaints. I didn't roll an ankle. I didn't have to stop. I didn't have like nothing beyond my control really happened. And I cruised into the night and started getting, it was a little cold through the night. I had just like a tiny bit of little scratch in the back of my throat, nothing crazy. And then on the next morning, I got a little bit of a cough, and I didn't feel like it was messing with my performance. Honestly, it was just annoying, like something in your throat, in the back of your throat, and it did continue to get a little worse. And on that second morning, I also took a small microdose of mushrooms. May or may not have taken a very small microdose of mushrooms, because it was something that I had just kind of wanted to do going in. I'd brought them prepared to do that, just a little capsule, but I wanted to. I don't know, I just wanted to see, and it seemed like it was just such a cool independent experience that I was running through nature. It just seemed kind of like an opportunity wasted if I didn't. And so that was pretty, it didn't have like an immense effect. Already my mind was kind of in a psychedelic state and altered, but I definitely noticed it, and it just kind of switched things up for a little bit. But as I continued into that second day, my feet really started to hurt. I ended up taking, I had a little blister pack of ibuprofen in my, like my emergency kit in my bag. I took 2 of those, and that really helped. And it was kind of like one of those facepalm moments where I'm like, why have I never done this before? Like, just, you know what I mean? Like it never occurred to me, just take 2 ibuprofen if something hurts really, really bad, and I just don't traditionally take them. So, that helped a lot, but eventually that only goes so far. And, despite that though, like aside from my feet, everything else started to feel really good and like better the longer I went onto that second day, like past the 24-hour mark. I just felt really good. And and by the time I had finished, I like was very convinced I could run, just start to do the whole thing over again. Like I had this very brief minute. I crossed the finish line to the dot. I did 10 air squats on the spot with my ruck on my back and everything. And I felt amazing. Like I was like, man, I like and the way my mind was in that moment is I was like, I might be like something else, where I might be like seriously, you know what I mean? Seriously good at this. And and then I sat down, and within minutes, just shut off. And it was like I sat down, I had a slice of pizza in my hand, 'cause for whatever reason, that's just like my psychological comfort food when I do, when I'm doing stuff like this. And but it was funny. I sat down with a slice of pizza, my phone in my hand. I was texting a buddy, and I was like, "Man, I don't know. I'm telling you, like, we feel good. Maybe we should like take the ladies out to dinner tonight. Like, I could have like a normal night tonight. You know what I mean?" And then, and 4 minutes later, I like everything just shuts off. I can't. I'm like, and the coughing is getting worse. My legs don't, I'm like, oh my God, I might actually like, you know, I was prepared to damage myself for this, but I might have done a pretty good job of that. And, and so at that point, my girl, who hadn't been feeling well either, tested positive for COVID. And so give me a test also. And it turns out I was positive the whole time. She had come home from work the day before. And at some point, I had picked it up. Um, and so the next day was pretty rough. The coughing and the joint pains and some muscle spasms on top of the actual, ultra effects, which seemed to hit me pretty good because I can never sleep the night after. Like I feel really wired out, and like I might nod off for like a long nap, but I know I don't get any real sleep, and I'm not hungry either. So the next day was a little rough. I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't, but the second night after, ate a lot of like really good food, and I just like basic stuff: steak, vegetables, a bunch of eggs. Like I was just getting really hungry, and a bunch of beans and rice, fruit, all aged everything. And then I slept for 12 hours straight, uninterrupted. And I'm a guy who sleeps 6.5 hours, 7 on average. Not by, I don't set an alarm or anything. That's just kind of what my body seems to need and thrive on, is about 7 hours. And so it's very unusual for me to sleep longer than that. And I slept 12 hours uninterrupted. I woke up, I felt great. The feet were messed up pretty good. My doctor or orthopedist is a triathlete, and so he kind of told me, is like, you got to be really careful because your feet are just going to be loaded with micro fractures all over the place right now, and a couple real ones most likely in your toes. And but other than that, I mean, I felt really good. I like to kind of just luxuriate and take about 2 or 3 days after to just lay around and eat and watch stupid, pointless TV and do nothing, kind of bask in my pain, and then I was ready to get back to it.
Yeah, absolutely wild. So at the end of all of that, what was the official Guinness World Record that you ended up getting?
116.2 miles with 35 pounds. And I don't think the self-supported or the nonstop was actually part of that. But I never officially registered it. I checked. I mean, I confirmed it, but I might do that still, but it just wasn't really important to me. But I probably should, yeah. Or see what the
What did you eat? What did you eat during all of that, James? Like you're obviously out there for over 24 hours. Other than the magic mushrooms that you put in, that obviously helped a bit. What else did you put in your system to get through that?
So we one of my favorite like just basic snack day to day, not specific to running, is Aussie Bites. They're like these little you know what those are, the dried fruit. Yeah, I like those a lot, man. And so like always, I bring some of those, but as we've talked about before, I get flavor fatigue. So Aussie Bites, dried mangoes, and dried date rolls with coconut are my kind of go-to fuel foods for running, along with juices and whatever else. I'm not a huge fan of the gels. I do like the tailwinds, and I had a good amount of those with me. I think I ended up going through most of them, 6, 7, 8 of them, something like that. But overall, it was just a lot of that. The morning of, right before, I had steak, eggs, juice, I had gotten most of my carbs in the night before. I had some that morning, but I knew that I was just going to be having them constantly through the run, and that I was pretty topped off, having prepared for the, loaded up for about 3 days before. Nothing, I mean, nothing excessive that would cause my stomach issues, but I made sure I was topped off on the glycogen. So throughout, yeah, the dried mangoes, the date rolls, the Aussie bites, and the tailwind, most of it. I tried to kind of observe, still observe a more, as much of a normal schedule as I could. So, like in the morning, when the sun came up, I would kind of do my normal 10-minute meditation internally. And I would, eat a little breakfast, which, I mean, you're snacking constantly at, on the hour, every hour at the very least. But like during those morning, breakfast, lunch, and dinner time meals, I would try to make them bigger or somehow different. It's like I'd add a Snickers bar on top of the normal thing, or I'd have something like, something just a little different. I also, the other thing is hazelnuts and macadamia nuts. I ate a good amount of both, just because they were easy, packageable, non-perishable, and then I had tubes of peanut butter and cashew butter as well.
Were,
Um,
were there ever times, James, where you did either get that palate fatigue or flavor fatigue, or you had your stomach turned and you're like, oh crap, this is a bit of a problem. I've got to figure this out.
no, it was pretty good all around. So I had spent a lot of time adapting my stomach to those foods and to eating. I had spent more than a month practicing eating on the run and digesting on the run to that extent. Like, obviously, I'm already pretty used to it. Like, I can go out on a trail run, stop for 5 minutes, have, snack down some stuff, and then keep going pretty well. My body's used to it. But as far as eating without stopping, I'd been, 3 4 weeks of like real regular training. My stomach had already been used to those foods. Nothing new was introduced, obviously, which that was silly. The only other thing I really had to be very careful about was electrolytes. I brought a mix. Again, that was the flavor fatigue problem for sure, was the electrolytes, because even it's like how many flavors of element are there, and then I had pink salt and Celtic salt too, because it's like, I don't know, like pink salt, they taste subtly different, enough to get tired of them for sure. And um, but yeah, overall, it was just mostly just trying to keep up with it, because, like, as you know, the longer you go, the more you need every hour. And so originally just trying to hit that 200 to 300 calories per hour with about 16 ounces of fluid and about 8 grams of protein in those calories, something roughly that. But as that went on, I was like trying to hit more like, 500 or more every hour. But the flavor fatigue is rough. And so it's like, I did have I mean, it wasn't warm anymore, but I had a cheeseburger packed up in my bag too. Then that was something that I would use to like lure myself forward. I'd be like, all right, so, once you're past this point, you can have half that cheeseburger. And it's just like wrapped in foil, but not the best running digestible food. But I was willing to take the risk. But throughout the whole thing, I only had to make one bowel movement. It was solid, so it was fairly easy to just have a bag, tuck it back there, and kind of just let loose, and then have wet wipes and a disposable, sanitation disposable. And it was pretty straightforward. That's one of the most common questions I get is how I did that, and then pee and you just go out your leg. I mean, like any runner has probably done at any point. Um, and then people also wondered how I kept my headphones charged. That kind of always like surprised me that people ask that, 'cause it's very simple. Like, it's a $20 power bank off Amazon that's the size of your phone and will charge it for a week. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, okay. But I think those were really like, yeah, those were the only thing that people didn't, off the top of their head know, or they asked a lot.
What about your mindset? Anyone who's done any ultras or any, I would I would go into the space to say they've done anything that's outside of their normal and they've challenged themselves. One of the biggest hurdles you have to get over is the one that's in your mind. Obviously, when you're going for 24 hours or anyone that's done those long events, it's a real roller coaster. There's some parts where you're the greatest thing ever to hit this earth. You're convinced that you're the best runner in the entire world. And then there's other times where you're absolutely convinced where this is not for you. You're doubting why you're even out here. What am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. What was it like doing this with the ruck on the back, knowing that you're doing this self-supported and you're doing it non-stop? What was the hurdles like?
Well, firstly, that was the perfect description of how you feel in those situations. So it was weird. It's funny you mentioned Jordan because in the past I have had those moments where like, oh, this is so hard. I could just stop and go home and curl up on the couch and watch Family Guy and or whatever it is, eat ice cream and donuts. This time that didn't really happen, but it was like my mind attacked me in a different way that was kind of more insidious and indirect. And it was like I started thinking in the middle of the night out there alone, with your brain kind of like goes through these, even when you're awake, it goes through the natural circadian patterns and rhythms. And when you deprive it of sleep, it really wanders and becomes vivid. And my brain started asking myself, like, why? This is stupid. Like, what's the actual point of this? Not this is hard, you should quit. And like, I was ready for that. What I wasn't ready for was like my brain just questioning the whole project itself, that like there was any point to it or validity to it. And so that was something I had to grapple with for a little bit. But I find in these situations, like thinking about stuff like that kind of stresses me out. And so it's pretty welcome when I can finally just tuck it in my mind and be like, I'll figure it out later. Because if you run long enough, it's going to melt away. Like it's going to turn into something else or whatever. So I was able to put it in the back of my mind and go. And yeah, like overall, it did drop below freezing in the night, but I had some good like merino wool gear, and everything was pretty. I mean, it got uncomfortable for sure for a few hours, but as soon as the sun started coming up, it started to feel good again, and all the doubts kind of, it's funny how that works, but all the doubts kind of melted away along with all that. So I mean, I'd be lying if I said it was some grand odyssey, that I had to endure. I had a great time, man. Like the truth is, I had a blast. I didn't make a dollar from doing it. I didn't, you know what I mean? No sponsorships, no nothing. I just had a good time, man. And think actually that the only thing else I would add is that at the end of it, I was a little disappointed because I realized I could do more. Like, especially if I believed, if my sights had been set further, I could have gone further. And so I am considering breaking my own record and maybe bringing a film crew. I've actually may or may not have talked to a film crew about documenting and tracking the whole thing.
Heard it here first. Well, exclusive on the TFT Performance podcast. This is the next thing I want to talk to you about, James, because obviously there is a huge mental side to doing this type of activity with all sports, whether it's jujitsu, whether it's hunting, whether it's ultra running, huge mental side of it. But there is a physical side of it, and you can't deny it. Like you need your body to have a certain level of conditioning. You need your muscles to have a certain level of stability to prevent injuries and whatnot. And I always say to people, you need your body to be fit enough to do what your mind's about to ask it to do, which is pretty intense thing. And this is where it's very interesting from your perspective, right? Wild hunt conditioning, really popular. If you guys haven't seen it on Instagram, blown up. I'd say blown up over the last 12 months, just absolutely going off. And that's all you guys do, right? Is strength conditioning, all of this work. But it's such an interesting point because you're encompassing all these different sports and you're making it work. Talk us through how you got your body prepared and then how is that aligned with the ethos of wild hunt conditioning?
So, I mean, it is one and the same thing. I mean, Wild Hunt is the system I use for myself that I initially was started to develop for myself before I took this line. But so the way that I approach it is, first of all, there's just so many things I wanted to do. I wanted to grapple, I wanted to run ultras, I wanted to lift, I wanted to hunt. And pretty much everyone I talked to was like, "Nah, you can't. That's just too many moving pieces to balance." So I messed with everything. I tried it blocks, seasons. I tried organic and holistic mixes of the both, and everything I could to balance and fit. And then I realized that it really wasn't quite as difficult as people made it out to be. It was more complicated for sure, but all it came down to was simplifying the moving pieces. So essentially what we do is we take the minimum effective dosage of many different methodologies and we select the most effective ways to achieve and execute our goals within those. So a good example would be like none of us are professional power lifters, right? But we still would do powerlifting type, your basic bench, squat, deadlift type movements. And but instead of doing all sorts of crazy rep schemes and conjugate approaches and all that, it's generally something like start with perfect form, perfect technique, learn the basics, and build up every workout. Just work up to 3 sets of 3 at 85%. Nothing crazy, not maxing out every week, not pushing your body in all these crazy positions or anything like that. Just work up to that. And then have some accessories to, improve your joint integrity, reinforce the muscular change responsibilities, particularly targeting the weakest first. So it's like sticking with the deadlift analogy or example. If you're working on that deadlift and your 3 sets of 3, and on that last set, you start to see some lagging on, say, the lockout of the deadlift, at the top where you're boom, everything's locking into position. Most likely your glutes are lagging. Almost certainly your glutes are going to be the part lagging that chain. So we're not just going to randomly try to strengthen muscles in your posterior chain and hope it makes your deadlift better, but we're going to do some glute, some barbell hip thrusters, some reversed hyper, some stuff like that to actually reinforce specific points, especially with something like the glutes. We're also going to be having all sorts of mobility stuff built into the training, and your warm-ups, your cool downs, and your active recovery days. Especially looking to reinforce joint or movement patterns that are neglected in our modern day lives. So external rotation of the shoulder, lateral movement of the hip socket, pretty much anything with the neck, all these things. We really want to patch the weak points, because when you are subjecting your body to many pressures in terms of endurance, resistance, and combat sports, etc., weaknesses become a much bigger vulnerability. They're much more likely to be exposed when your body is being assailed from all these different angles simultaneously. So we focus a lot on that joint integrity, on the muscular chains and upper body armor, lower body athleticism, and so it's just basically we're checking all these little boxes. And yeah, it takes time. Like if you were to just sit down and just do entirely powerlifting workouts, yeah, your bench, your deadlift, and your squat they're gonna go up faster than they would if you're training everything. But if you're patient and you're using quality over quantity, the minimum effective dose of everything, you're still going to get stronger doing 3 sets of 3 at 85%, just slowly, gradually, forever getting stronger. But, progressive overload still applies. So from there, you can also still be working on other stuff simultaneously. You're not using all your nervous energy, all your calories, all these things on, trying to chase the biggest squat on, in human history or whatever.
What would you say is the minimum effective dose for each of those disciplines when you're thinking about, say, resistance training, when you're looking at endurance training, combat sport training? What is that minimum effective dose?
It's going to vary from person to person, age, gender, hormone levels, etc. If you're a 22-year-old kid, with good genetics and you're on steroids, you're going to be able to, your minimum effective dose is going to be pretty high. If you're a 48-year-old dad who, hasn't worked out in 3 years at all and maybe played football when he was, whatever, not so much. However, having said that, generally, well, let's look at it from a weekly structure. Generally, if you're lifting intelligently, balanced, and like scientifically, 2 to 3 days a week is going to be fine. Even for my professional MMA fighters, they lift 3 days a week outside of camp, 2 days a week in camp. The structure of the lifting, intensity, et cetera, will change a little bit for sure. But that volume is not, it's either way, it's 2 to 3 days a week. So it's the same thing for us. Lift 2 to 3 days a week, one long run per week. That's relative to everyone. Long run could be 3 to 5 miles. My long runs tend to be 30 or 40, depending on how much time I can find. I like my guys to sprint once a week, and it doesn't have to be much. It could be a total of 150 yards of sprinting broken up in 10s and 20s. It could be barefoot on turf, on the grass, on the track. It could be all, literally all sorts. In fact, I encourage diversity in that regard. And then they'll ruck once a week. And again, that doesn't have to be super long. Generally, that's plugged in as an active recovery day, unless they're trying to focus. Like I got one guy, it's preparing for hunting season or whatever it is, or when I'm preparing for bear season. Then yeah, it becomes a little bit more of a primary piece. But and then within those days, like a typical lifting day, again, we come in, we warm up with dynamic movement, walking RDLs and jumps and hops and lateral movements and bear crawls and duck walks. We move into some calisthenics, nothing basic, but just to make sure you can do a pull up, a dip, a squat with perfect form and not be fatigued super easily. And then you work up to your heavy, generally, not always, but we'll use it as a baseline 3 sets of 3 at 85%. You build up to it too, and you get those free reps and work on your technique along the way. After that, you'll do some GPP, a weighted carry, sled, whatever it is for that day. We're big fans of weighted carries, but sleds have a big part too. And then from there, we'll talk about the accessories. What's the weakest link in the chain that you're working out that day? If it's a deadlift day, is it the glutes? Is it the hamstrings? Is it the upper back? If it's a bench day, is it the chest, the shoulders, the tris, et cetera, et cetera. And then the accessories from there, little conditioning, and that's generally 5 minutes to 7 minutes of hell, but still 5 to 7 minutes, and then a little cool down and you're out. 2 or 3 days a week and consistently stronger, less injuries. Again, not going to happen if you do it. Not going to happen as fast if you do an 8-week powerlifting block, and focus entirely on that, but it will happen.
How are you working with guys, James? Is there a physical location for a gym, or if people are listening to this, they go, "Holy smokes, I want to get involved in this"? Can they hit you up online, do online programming?
I'm pretty limited or selective in who I work with as a personal coach these days. I'm launching a Wild Hunt certification program for some coaches, but even that's going to be, I'm very picky about these things. I tend to approach it more academically and scientifically than commercially. I'm genuinely fascinated with the development of physical capabilities. And so I spend a lot of my time focusing on that. But if they did want to work with me, and it was the right match, they could hit me up on Instagram, or I tend to train every weekend at Super Training Gym, Mark Bell's Super Training Gym in Sacramento. And they would definitely be able to find me there on pretty much any given weekend, or contact me and meet me there. And then I do have like a Major League Performance, the gym owned by one of my childhood friends. We've been friends for 25 years now, in Roseville, California. And I do, occasionally meet and work with people there as well, because it's more of a private team training type environment. But generally, I spend as much time as possible in the lab, and then I have, I cap my roster out at a dozen guys, some online, some are local, but I like to pour all my available attention into them. And so in the past, especially when I was first coming up and I needed the money, I'd be coaching 20 guys or something like that, and it stretches you pretty thin. It doesn't leave you a lot of room for your own training and your own research and evolution as a coach or as a student of strength. And also, man, like the whole point I got into this was so I could work from a laptop while I'm hunting in the mountains and doing running ultras in various locales and countries.
Yeah, awesome. Very last thing before I let you go, James. When's the next Guinness World Record attempt? Do we have a date for it set yet?
We don't, but I'm eyeing that up. I'm also eyeing a couple other things. Long term, I would also perhaps like to make an attempt on the Dinnie stones, but that's going to take there's some ancient stones with rings attached in Scotland that only so many people have been able to lift. But no date yet. I'm working on the book right now, which is it's not a training book. It's just a history of physical fitness and training. And it's like Muhammad Ali, Hickson Gracie, and I'll look at guys like that, as well as examine cultures like the Spartans or the Rara Murray running tribe of Mexico. So that's the focus right now. And from there, we're going to kind of see what's ready, what the timing works like on a next attempt or some other cool stuff.
All right, awesome. Busy schedule ahead. Well, James, thanks for carving out a bit of time and coming on, mate. I'm sure we'll get you on again once you do something crazy and add it to the list. But thanks so much, pal.
All right, brother. I'd love it.
And there it is, another episode of the TFD Performance Podcast. We have just launched our brand new course on our TFD Performance Hub, The Complete Guide to Creatine, where Dr. Scott Forbes breaks down literally everything we currently know about creatine so that you can make the most of this wonder supplement. If you use the link in the show notes, you'll also get 45% off your purchase. Thanks for listening in, and I'll see you guys for the next episode of the TFD Performance Podcast.